Feel like, I'm another singer, another guitar player.
When you've lived as long and as boldly as Willie Nelson, you start thinking differently about how your story should end. Now at 92, the country legend has been surprisingly open about something most people avoid entirely: his own funeral. In typical Willie fashion, the conversation isn't dramatic or sentimental. It's honest, reflective, and a little blunt. What caught fans off guard isn't just how he wants to be remembered, but the fact that he's even spoken about who he'd rather not have there when that day comes. And as strange as that might sound at first, Willie insists it has nothing to do with bitterness. Instead, it reflects the same values that shaped his entire life: authenticity, loyalty, and staying true to yourself no matter what the world expects. To understand why he feels that way, you have to go back to where his story began, in the tiny town of Abbott, Texas, on April 29, 1933. Even his birthday has a little bit of Willie-style confusion attached to it. A late-night paperwork mix-up at the hospital left some uncertainty about whether he was technically born just before or just after midnight. Most people would try to correct the record. Willie simply turned it into a joke and celebrated his birthday for 2 days every year. He was born during the Great Depression to teenage parents who were struggling just to survive. When his parents separated and his mother eventually left, Willie and his sister Bobby were raised by their grandparents, who became the real foundation of his life. They encouraged him to sing in church and, most importantly, gave him the first guitar that would change everything. That instrument became more than a hobby. It became his escape from a life of cotton fields, poverty, and uncertainty. By the time he was only 7 years old, Willie had already written his first song. It may have been inspired by something as simple as the gold stars his grandmother gave him when he practiced music, but even then he was learning how to turn emotion into melody. By 9, he was already playing guitar professionally in a small local band. His grandmother worried about the barroom environment, but she also knew that music had already claimed him. Even as a teenager juggling sports, school, and odd jobs, from dishwashing to tree trimming, music stayed at the center of his life. After a brief stint in the U.S. Air Force that ended because of back problems, Willie drifted from job to job before slowly finding his way into radio and local performances. Success didn't come quickly. In fact, he nearly quit music altogether at one point, choosing instead to sell Bibles, vacuum cleaners, and encyclopedias door to door. Ironically, he was pretty good at sales, but the pull of music never really let him go. His real breakthrough didn't come from singing at first. It came from songwriting. When Farron Young recorded Willie's song, "Hello Walls," it became a massive hit, and suddenly people in Nashville began paying attention. Soon, major artists like Roy Orbison and Patsy Cline were recording his songs. One of them, "Crazy," would become one of the most iconic country songs ever written. But even with that success, Willie struggled to fit into the polished Nashville system. After years of frustration, and even losing his home in a devastating fire, he walked away from the industry entirely and moved back to Texas. What looked like the end of his career was actually the beginning of the chapter that made him a legend. In Austin during the early 1970s, Willie reinvented himself. The clean-cut image disappeared, replaced by the long braids, bandanas, and rebellious spirit that would define him. Albums like Shotgun Willie and later Red-Headed Stranger didn't just succeed, they helped create the outlaw country movement alongside artists like Waylon Jennings. Instead of following Nashville's rules, they wrote honest songs about real life, freedom, and independence. By the time Willie scored his first #1 hit as a singer with "Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain," he was already in his 40s, proof that superstardom doesn't always arrive on schedule. Over the decades that followed, Willie Nelson became far more than just a musician. He became a cultural symbol. With hundreds of albums, countless awards, and a career spanning more than 70 years, he built a legacy that few artists in any genre could ever match. Yet the road hasn't always been easy. Health scares, from collapsed lungs to severe breathing problems and even COVID-19 in his late 80s, have tested him again and again. Still, every time it seemed like the road might finally slow him down, Willie found a way back to the stage. Even now, living with conditions like emphysema, he continues performing, driven by the same passion that first pulled him toward music as a child in Abbott. And maybe that's why he talks about the end of life with such calm honesty. Willie doesn't see death as something mysterious or frightening. To him, it's simply the final verse in a long song. When he talks about his funeral, he says he wants it to feel personal and peaceful, more like a gathering of people who truly shared the journey than a celebrity spectacle. That's why he's made it clear he doesn't want it turning into a parade of famous faces or industry figures who were never really part of his life. His reasoning isn't about grudges or drama. It's about authenticity. Willie Nelson has spent more than 9 decades doing things his own way, refusing to bend to expectations or polish his personality for the spotlight. So it makes perfect sense that even his final goodbye would follow the same rule. For Willie, the end shouldn't be a show. It should simply be a quiet celebration of a life lived honestly, surrounded by the people and the music that truly mattered.